Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm delighted to speak in this debate marking the 71st anniversary of the liberation of the concentration and death camps, particularly in light of the fact that fewer and fewer Holocaust survivors are able to share their story. And it's very important that their stories, their experience, their horror is never forgotten. Especially as we live in an increasingly dangerous world, and the story of the Holocaust is not just the story of the Jewish people, but a terrible and chilling indictment of mankind itself, and the cruelty, the barbarity of which mankind is capable. As an ex-English teacher of over 20 years' experience, I'm particularly grateful to the excellent work carried out by the Holocaust Educational Trust work. The Lessons from Auschwitz project since 2006 has enabled 3,000 pupils and teachers in Scotland to learn and remember the lessons of this brutal part of our recent past. The importance of teaching this shameful episode from the past to our young people today cannot be overestimated. And I recall teaching a second-year class in Airdrie Academy in North Lanarkshire over 20 years ago about this part of history as we studied the novel Friedrich by Hans-Peter Richter, the very moving story set in the 1930s Germany of friendship between two young boys, one German and one a German Jewish boy. As Nazi hatred permeated their world, their neighbourhood, their friendship, the German boy finds himself increasingly estranged from his Jewish friend, and the tragedy that this leads to. As part of the children's learning about that period, I was successful in securing a visit from the late Reverend Ernest Levy, himself a survivor of Auschwitz, although his father and brother and sister did not survive. Despite his advanced age and his frailty, he made the trip from his home in Giffnock in Glasgow to Airdrie Academy to meet the children and tell them his story, which he still found hard to do almost 50 years later. He talked of the continuing lack of tolerance in an angry world and set out his experiences and his will to survive the brutality of Auschwitz in his book, Just One More Dance. I am honoured to have met this man of huge courage and gentleness, and I will never forget him, and I don't think the young people who met him will ever forget him either. And I said a silent prayer for him and all those who were so brutally and cruelly killed when I visited Sachsenhausen camp just outside Berlin, and again when I visited Auschwitz some years later after his death, and a few years later in the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust. And it's some comfort to know that he spent the last 48 years of his life happily in Scotland after his surviving brother and sister persuaded him to settle there, telling him of the welcoming nature of Glaswegians and the freedom for Jewish people there to worship in peace. There was, they said, anti-Semitism, but it came from ignorance, not hatred. They believed that he, Ernest Levy, could help alter that, and he spent the rest of his life doing so. He went on to become a leading figure in the Scottish Jewish community, a passionate advocate of interfaith dialogue. A testament to the relationships he built between faiths was evident in the outpourings of tributes and grief and deep respect he received from leaders of all faiths upon his death. Despite the enormous human suffering, the unspeakable waste of human life, the unimaginable cruelty, the inhumane barbarism of the Holocaust, it's extremely depressing to think that tolerance in societies around the world is still a challenge. As Holocaust Memorial Day events take place across Scotland and across the UK, we must remember these terrible events and reflect on the fact that as a species we have not moved very far forward at all. We've seen other people subject to genocidal attacks, such as those in Rwanda, Cambodia, Bosnia, Darfur and other places. Commemorating the Holocaust is essential for our past, but it's even more important for our future. And it's right that this House should debate it and highlight the importance of never forgetting and not standing by. And I will end with a thought that UK Poet Laureate Scotland's own Caroline Duffy put in her poem Shooting Stars, remember these appalling days which make the world forever bad. Madam Deputy Chair, the future is not yet written. The world need not be forever bad. The question is what we are prepared to do to make the world good.
Hear, hear.